sorry. The way you treated me was wrong. I was the one who taught you all that you know. But you had your friends to make me sing another song. So good luck may be with you.
Probably should have played the song at the end of the show, actually, now that I think of it. But, okay, so it's Ask or Tell Me Anything today. That means you can call 888-720-9677, a.k.a. 888-720-WNPR. And you can talk about anything you want. We have no guardrails here. Possibly we should. But anyway, Meg Fitz will be answering your calls here today. You will find that an enjoyable experience all by itself. And as I say, there are, there's no specific thing. But I'm going to do something that I typically don't do because it's too much of a typical kind of talk radio host thing to do. I'm going to begin with a beef. And it's not even that interesting a beef, but I'm going to begin with it anyway. So it would be better if I could call my own show. If I could call the show now and say, hey, this is Stan for Burlington. You know what happened to me today? But I'm not going to do that because it's too much work. So, but I was driving here, a very, very short drive from my house to where I'm sitting now. But as I was proceeding, I was proceeding east on Asylum Street in Hartford. And there's sort of a tricky intersection, and I could hear an ambulance coming up Elizabeth Street, I guess is what that is, toward me. And, one of the things that really has broken down here in society, if you want to get rear-ended, stop for an emergency vehicle, because the chance of you getting rear-ended is pretty high. I had it happen really badly once, but so I could hear the ambulance is coming. It's, we have a lot of ambulances around here because we're right near St. Francis Hospital. So the ambulance is coming, it's lit up, sirens are going. So I stop, and there's somebody in a Volkswagen Atlas. I didn't even know there was such a thing. I think it was a big honking SUV-looking thing. Starts to go around me to pull into the intersection where the ambulance is coming. So I start madly honking at that person. And then I'm even sticking my arm out the driver's side window, because the person is coming up on my left to go around me so that they can drive into the intersection where the ambulance is coming and be a nuisance. And possibly a hazard. And so I finally get the person to stop. But it's when did when I grew up, my parents would always pull over if there were emergency vehicles coming. Although we had a separate problem in my family. My father, and there are other people like this, but my father liked to follow the fire trucks. He liked to see fires, I guess. So anyway, he would, if we were even out for a Sunday family drive, and then a fire truck or a couple of fire trucks passed us going in the other direction, he just whipped the car around. And my mother sighed and said, "Oh, Bob, no," and followed the fire trucks wherever they were going. So that's a whole separate problem. But by and large, my parents and the adults of their generation, the greatest generation, the so-called greatest generation, they pulled over for emergency vehicles because that's what you do. And now I'm a baby boomer, and my generation has been, I think, pretty good about pulling over for emergency vehicles because that's what you do. Something's eroding here. Some part of the common weal is eroding so that people don't see that as something that they should do. And I don't understand it. I know I'm sounding like an old, confused person, partly because I am, but also partly because, this is the kind of thing I guess you're supposed to accept. The times are changing. People are getting back to wearing Tudor or Elizabethan hats, but they're also not not pulling over for emergency vehicles. And I think that's deplorable. So there. And I don't care how much it hurts my election chances. All right, so we're getting ready here. The number is 888-720-9677. We sort of almost have some calls. Are these calls ready to go? I can't tell if they're ready to go. They're not. Okay. The calls are not ready to go. So I will also say this while we're getting ready. I don't ever remember caring so much about a Canadian election. I mean, I suppose if you go back to the French separatist movements and René Lévesque and all that stuff, I guess Canadian elections were kind of interesting then. People would get excited about them. But, I mean, it's been a long time since I was like, wow, let's see what's going to happen here. But obviously, the Canadian national elections are today. And that's just like all by itself kind of a Canadian thing too. Like on a Monday? Monday just doesn't seem like an election day, but they also do Thanksgiving, so it's fine. But so now we really want to know whether the Poilievre's Conservative Party is going to be actively damaged by Donald Trump. Every election that takes place in the coming months and possibly years, everywhere in the world, it'll have a Donald Trump component, and I think that's kind of weird too. But yeah, today the question will be: I mean, I'm actually planning to go to Canada, to Montreal specifically, next month, and I don't even know exactly what to do about that. Like, should I wear a T-shirt or something that says I voted against him 3 different times, or is that is that starting the conversation too much? But yeah, it's just like I feel like the Canadian election is going to be affected by this, and I see we're having a little problem here. Okay, we're having a little problem hearing the callers and stuff like that. So I might be vamping a little while here, but I do feel as though the Canadian election will be affected by Donald Trump and probably the conclave. I mean, nobody really knows about conclaves. And as I like to point out, just because it makes me sound more interesting, I have covered conclaves in the past. I covered one conclave. But I've continued to follow conclaves. And it's really the one thing where, like, I can't even believe that they now publish betting odds about this. These betting markets where you can wager about anything, you can wager about the conclave. There is no conceivable way to come up with odds on a conclave because invariably nobody knows what's happening. And when I say that, I'm like, for example, the Argentine cardinal who became Pope Francis was not on anybody's short lists in 2013. Nobody knew he was coming. Nobody saw him coming. Nobody really saw Wojtyła coming as JP2 or Albino Luciani coming as JP1. I mean, typically nobody knows, including the people who are really supposed to know about this stuff. Now, here you could say, one thing that you can say is that roughly 80% of the cardinals who are going to vote in this conclave were made cardinal by Francis. So the likelihood that they would repudiate his legacy by not by picking somebody really, really different is fairly low, but not definitely low. Wow, there's all kinds of very strange and frightening things happening with the phone board right now. So, even there, though, I feel as though once they get inside there, first of all, just what Trump has done to the notion of internationalism and of international cooperation and the kind of attempt to impose American exceptionalism on the rest of the world, it's got to come up somehow. And I mean, you can even see it in the movie Conclave, which I realize is a fictional representation of a conclave. But there's like this very Trumpy guy, Tedesco. He's the cardinal everybody's afraid will get elected. So anyway, I'm just sort of rambling here, not because I enjoy the sound of my own voice, but because apparently our phones are having a problem here. And this, by the way, this is what you this is what you train for in public radio hosting and radio hosting in general. You have to be ready for the moment where you don't ever get any calls or something goes wrong or something like that. And I've had this happen. On one occasion, everything broke here and I couldn't get calls and nothing worked. The only thing that worked was me talking into the microphone for the full 49 minutes. So by the end of the show, I'm sure it was starting to sound like a therapy session, talking about little things I experienced as a child. Just sort of ransacking my consciousness for something to talk about. But I can do those things. In fact, can I just tell you a quick story? So I went through a period where I was in exile from Exile is not, well, it's close enough. So I had a show that aired from 10 to noon on another radio station. And they canceled my show to replace me with Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura Schlesinger is this person who gives advice that really you probably should not follow. And that in many cases, she herself has never followed. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, they replaced me with her because they thought they would get better ratings, which I don't think ever did. But they didn't quite want to let me go either. So they kept me on staff and they said, just do some commentaries on Morning Drive and make up a show for yourself. Figure out a show that you could do. And then they offered me like the 3 worst time slots. And I just didn't want to do a Saturday show for a bunch of reasons. So I decided I would do a show on Sunday nights because I figured really almost nobody would be listening on Sunday nights. So it wouldn't matter what I did, that I would have sort of a kind of freedom. So I do this show on Sunday nights, and I had this wonderful older engineer who was kind of a legendary Connecticut radio engineer. No, it was Charlie Brown. His name was Charlie Brown, which is kind of funny all by itself. It wasn't John Ramsey. But he was sort of like also a kind of go with the flow kind of guy. So there was one day where I was going to be preempted because the station also carried the Red Sox and there was no podcast or streaming this is, in the distant past. This was sometime in the 1990s. So the Red Sox were going to be on. And so I just thought, I have the day off. I was told essentially that I would have the day off. And I remember I went to some kind of party. I don't remember what the party was, but it was like a cookout or something. And, I had a couple of drinks, I'm relaxing. And suddenly, somehow or other, somebody gets a hold of me and says, the Red Sox are rained out. And the thing was, there was an away game, and I guess I wasn't watching how the weather was in Texas or Oakland or wherever they were. And so I suddenly had to get in my car and drive in with possibly a couple of glasses of wine under my belt, and B, no plan whatsoever, nothing. And it was, I think, a 3-hour show, and there's not a lot of advertising on Sunday nights either. So, and there's no like traffic reporter or anything. So I went in there, and I wish there was extant audio of that show, because I really do think I was just scraping the back of my mental garage, rummaging around among the busted lawnmowers and rusty rakes of my own mental garage, hoping that I would find something there. And I have no idea what I talked about. But I think we could take calls, and maybe we got a couple of calls. I don't know. But it was 3 hours of just, the kind of thing that terrifies certain members of the radio broadcasting public. Not so much me. I do want to quickly say here, because I have loads of time to say it, that tomorrow night, that's Tuesday, April 29th, we are going to be at the Harvard Stage Company. We are going to be there at 7 p.m. sitting on the stage. It's a pretty minimalist set, so they won't have to move tables and things like that. And we're just going to talk with the director, with the Shakespeare scholar, with a member of the cast of Romeo and Juliet, about Romeo and Juliet, about its enduring appeal. This, for me, was my 3rd Romeo and Juliet that I've seen at the Hartford Stage Company. In other words, I saw one that had Callista Flockhart in it many years ago. She hadn't even done Ally McBeal yet. She was just about to do that. And then I saw Darko Tresnik's, whenever that was set in, made to look like an Italian movie from the late 1940s. And now I've seen this one, which incorporates a lot of Mexican aesthetics and kind of Day of the Dead aesthetics in a very interesting way. So anyway, we're going to be there. You can come, and you do not have to pay anything. It is free admission. And what else do I need to say about this? Except that I don't quite understand this, but I think there is on our site, which would be ctpublic.org/Colin, I think you'll see a place where you can reserve a ticket. And you could also go on the Hartford Stage website, and if you click on events, we are one of the events, and you can reserve a ticket. Now, why you need a ticket to something that you get into for free. Like, what would happen if you showed up without a ticket? I think you probably would be let in. I'm going to guess that you would be let in. But if you're the kind of person who would enjoy the security blanket of having reserved a ticket, you can do that. But otherwise, yeah, just show up at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. I will be wearing a funny hat. It would be not funny, in the Elizabethan period, although they think they would be saying, that hat is pretty Tudor there. It's not that Elizabethan. I think that's what they would be saying to me. But, and we're going to have a fascinating conversation. We'd love to see you. One of the things we are quite seriously trying to do these days is get out in front of our listeners a little bit more. We just, last week aired the Bacharach and Warwick show that we did. And we're going to try to do more of this because I don't really know why exactly. I mean, it's radio. The whole point of radio is you don't have to look at the person who's doing it. And so all we seem to be doing is putting me on YouTube. By the way, you can hear me not take calls on YouTube as well as just hearing me not take calls on your radio. Yeah, go to the CT Public page. I think we're probably pretty easy to find there. So here's what I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose that we go to break so I can collect my thoughts, because the show may only be my thoughts. I'm also trying to think, we should think if there's some way, like a bunch of people have tried to call up and they were not able to get on the air. How could they get their ideas to us or their questions to us? Maybe we could use, I don't know, X? Can we use X anymore? Think about this, people who think about things. And I'll be sitting here quietly whimpering and getting ready for the next stretch of no callers.
I think I lost something in the water. I tried to swim to it. I could not swim to it. Drowned in a dream that should have made me stronger. I tried to swim through it. I could not swim through it.
All right. So, here's what's happened. We have sort of restored the phones, except that I can't see. But never mind. We'll do fine here. We'll be fine. We're just gonna fly by the seats of our respective pants, including the person who is known as Pants. All right. So, but we can begin anyway, comfortingly, with the stalwart Lake Como Dave, who's up on the board and who is visible. Hi, Lake Como Dave from Lake Como, Ohio.
Hey, Colin. Yeah, it's a good thing I purchased this high-tech cell phone that allowed me to punch through all that stuff, right? So, I had nothing today. I really had nothing to call in about, and it could be argued that I never do. But your opening thing about the ambulance and people not pulling over and all that, wow, did that just aligned with what's had me really depressed all morning about the Democrats' chances and how they've lost the touch to appeal to the common voter. And, I just was thinking, is it really that all of the Democrats, all of a sudden, and all but 3 or 4 of them, the most strident ones of them, have just collectively lost their fastball to, win anything? Or could it be that, just like what you opened today by talking about, that Trump and his ilk have very successfully managed to free people from the responsibility to do the right thing, or to go the extra mile, or to help people in need, to have any compassion. There's probably, I'll stop talking in a second, but I think there's 3 groups of people here. There's the MAGA group who will, maniacally go for that and like, yeah, great, man, we don't have any compunction anyway. There is, on the other end, there is people who we like to think we're in that group that we still insist that people do the right thing and go the extra mile and have compassion. And then there's that big middle third where people, even of goodwill, or people maybe who are even electorally blue, and somehow when this freeing up of the need to really exert themselves to do the right thing, when it's being said, nah, you don't have to do that, and they say, yeah, cool, let's not bother. What do you think?
First of all, I think you might be onto something. I do think a possible interpretation of that election is that people heard the message basically what you said, which is you don't have to care so much about other people. It's okay if you don't care about other people, which makes it you can see that happening with these deportations of people who didn't get due process or who were citizens or kids with cancer. You just don't have to care about those people. That seems to be part of the message to a certain segment of society. But I think also it's important to understand that there still is a bedrock group of people who do care about one another, who understand that the Rousseau social contract is that we have to make common cause, we have to we're in this together, and I think the next month or so will be very telling because, as you probably know, over the last 7 or so days, there's been a lot of polling on Trump's quote unquote first 100 days, which I think is actually tomorrow he hits 100. But and the polling is terrible. He's polling really, really badly. He's losing altitude on basically on almost every issue. He's still kind of above water on immigration and stuff like that, but almost everything else, he's way below water. And that doesn't really matter that much in any palpable sense, except that, and I give William Crystal a certain amount of credit for saying this on the Bulwark, it means presumably that Democrats and law firms and college presidents and scientists need not be so cowed. There's, I think, a lot of, as he sort of come at everybody with flamethrowers over the first 100 days, people are kind of throwing down their arms and going, what can we do? Oh, my goodness, we've got to settle this lawsuit right away. And the truth is he's not that popular. He wasn't all that popular to begin with. His approval rating just never, ever crests 50. And he's really not popular now. People don't like what he's doing. So, now I think also one of the ways that you get cred, to your point, like Homo Dave, one of the ways that you achieve some street cred is, if you're a Democrat, is you start punching your other Democrats. So J.B. Pritzker did this over the weekend in New Hampshire, not insignificantly, just saying, the rest of you, you're wimps, you're not fighting back. And I mean, there's some truth to that too, that people have been too afraid. I sort of feel like that, a little bit like that about the press too. I think the press has been over nervous, being afraid to have a comedian at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Oh heavens, what might happen there? And maybe as people look at his crappy polling, they'll say, well, we don't really have to dance to his tune, and that would be a nice breakthrough. But yeah, I don't know. But in terms of the emergency vehicles and stuff like that, I guess I should move on to another call. But I think people are still basically kind of good. Right around the time of the election, I remember I was with my dog, Declan the dog, at Penwood, which is a state park in Bloomfield, and I said hello to a couple who were kind of walking towards me back towards the parking lot as I was heading out with Declan. And what happened when the people got back to the parking lot was that they saw a little kind of a little wallet-y thing on the ground, and has the picture of the person who owns it, and that was me. And they realized that they had just walked past the person who had dropped this on the ground, and so the woman picked it up. And because I now had a considerable head start on her and was moving, she ran, and she didn't really look like the kind of person who runs that much. She ran all the way back to find me and give me my wallet. That's just one thing. But I think if you racked your brain, everybody listening right now, you could think of something in the last week or two where somebody did something like that, something they didn't have to do, and something that maybe put them out a little bit. I think when you see that, you realize we aren't a nation of selfish egotists. We are a nation currently led by a selfish egotist, but we are not necessarily that person. And I think we have to be of good faith about that. All right, now we're going to do mystery callers because I can't see their names, but we're going to go to them anyway. So we're going to start with this person right here, Ev. Oh, see, when I click on it, it pops up. So here's Ev.
Oh.
Ev. Okay, I can see your name and everything. Ev, hi. From Mansfield.
Wow, you're getting better and better.
Yeah.
I was afraid I didn't charge my phone this morning.
No, none of this was your fault.
So I called you 2 weeks ago about my free speech proxy idea.
Yes.
Where I would represent some. So I was listening to Maria Hinojosa. I don't know if that's her name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
But,
the artist formerly known as Maria Hinojosa. Yes.
Yeah, her and her show Driving the other night, and she was talking about somebody with a tattoo that was picked up by and sent to that awful place because he had some tattoo, and then she didn't finish the program because I arrived where I wanted to go. But she said, in particular, his particular tattoo had to do with his family and autism and something like that. So I'm thinking about how to do this now and expanding on this whole idea. So now I'm looking for somebody who can do temporary tattoos because I'm an old white guy.
Yeah.
And I'm too old to have a tattoo, but I would have a tattoo and then just go and show it. And because now I'm a tattooed person and ICE is less likely to get me. And then I mentioned this to another friend over the weekend, my friend Melinda, and she says, "Oh yeah, that's what happened in Denmark when the king put the Star of David on his shirt or something like that." I think it was Denmark. So anyway,
so it's sort of an I am Spartacus. It's sort of an I am Spartacus thing. That's what you're kind of doing. Right?
Whatever. I don't know. You know more about that stuff than I do. I'm just talking about this. So a bunch of us went around.
I love gladiator movies. Yeah.
I didn't see that movie, but so I don't know. That was my latest.
I don't. From where I'm sitting, Ev, and I'm just one human being talking to another human being. It feels like devotion worthy of a better cause. Like, I don't know how much you're going to get out of this. You're going to go to all the trouble of finding some temporary tattoo person and get some kind of henna tattoo or something, and then walk around with it. I think there are probably better ways. I mean, I think you've got a lot of good ideas, and your heart is in the right place, and your head is in the right place. And there's probably
I'm the reason I'm calling you is I need a gang of tattoo.
You need.
I mean, we could all invade like the New Haven Green.
Yeah.
And a bunch of guys are like from your age and my age down.
So you want a bunch of 70-year-old white guys with tattoos?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because and say this is Alfredo Garcia, except it wasn't. It was somebody else.
Yeah.
This is like his tattoo. This is why he got picked up.
Yeah.
So this is, to me, this is like the ultimate taunt to it. Anyway, so I don't know.
I say Godspeed. I say Godspeed. I mean, maybe this could work. I don't really see how personally, but look, here's a person, Ev, who's willing to put himself on the line and maybe call attention to himself in a certain way in order to maybe distract attention from people who are being targeted. This is proof that there are good people around. Once again, back to our conversation with Lake Como Dave. I bet Ev pulls over for emergency vehicles when they're coming. Unlike you, Mr. Whoever you were, I couldn't even see whether it was a man or a woman or whatever, but whoever you were in your black VW Atlas, I didn't even know there was a car called that. But I'm thinking about you right now, and I'm not thinking very nice things. All right, here we go. We're going to go to Tony. Tony in Killington, Vermont. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Colin. How are you today?
Excellent.
Great. Hey, that wasn't Eb from the Green Acres show, was it?
No, it was not. Well, I couldn't.
Okay.
You couldn't prove it one way or the other by me, but I feel like it's too much to hope for.
All right. I just haven't heard that name very often. Anyway, so do you happen to know those professors from? I don't know if you're familiar with this. The professors from.
You broke up a little bit.
Tim Snyder.
Yes.
Tim Snyder
yes.
And you do know him.
Yes, well, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't go bowling together or anything, but Tim Snyder was on my show about a month or so ago, and then Jason Stanley, who's one of the other, and so he and his wife Tim Snyder and his wife Marcy Shore, they're at the monk school in Toronto, and now Jason Stanley, also a professor of philosophy at Yale, who was on my show last week, is also going to the monk school of.
I heard that. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think? I mean, especially like Tim Snyder. No, so his book was all about how to combat anarchy, right? And how to live through it and fight it and all that.
Yeah, he's more about how to combat tyranny than about anarchy.
Yeah. Or tyranny, exactly. On tyranny, right? But he's moving to Canada. I mean, does that mean it's over?
No, I don't think it means it's over. First of all, and I'm not the expert on all this, but I maybe know a little bit more about it than the average person. So my understanding is that Tim Snyder and his wife went there made this decision, first of all, prior to the 2024 election, and did it for a series of personal/family reasons. And it's sort of interesting, too, because the Yale Daily News has covered this a lot. And it does seem as though Tim Snyder tells a slightly different story from the story that his wife tells. And Jason Stanley alluded to that last week when he was on our show. He said, that he is leaving because of the current political situation. But he said he didn't think the Snyders were. They had different reasons. And then he sort of said, I'm not even sure they both had the same reason for doing it, which is kind of the way that it's played out a little bit in the press as well. So I think it might be a mistake. I mean, it's obviously very tempting to lump them all in together. I don't think that's exactly quite what was happening.
Okay. Well, what do you think? I mean, sometimes I have a cousin who's sold their house in Florida, and they moved to Spain all because of this stuff.
Oh yeah, it's very tempting. Yeah, and actually, there's a piece by Lydia Pogreben, or that's Lydia Pogreben in the New York Times. That's very interesting. It's about how Mexico City has now become a place. I mean, there have always been expats in Mexico City, but people are going there. They would rather live with Claudia Sheinbaum as their president. Understandably, I would too. Than live here. So Mexico City has now become a place where people are removing themselves to. And I mean, I think that might be. I mean, all of these things are less simple than they appear in terms of the impact they have on the place where you're going. And at a certain point, Portugal is going to, if they haven't already, they're going to get kind of sick of Americans coming over there and driving up the house prices.
Well, yes. And, I mean, that's why I'm in Killington, Vermont, because I'm closer to Canada, just in case, it's like, okay, get in the car and go. But I don't know. It seems, it's like that whole thing with Vietnam, I just missed that, where I was one of the people who could have made that decision to, whether to go to Canada or to go and fight the draft here or just go. And I don't know. It feels a little funny. It feels like a little bit cowardly, even though I get it and I agree with a lot of why people do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the Vietnam Canadian thing is a little bit different. I mean, if you had three choices. You could go to Vietnam if you were drafted, you had a low number or whatever. You'd wind up in Vietnam or potentially in Vietnam. You could stay here and Muhammad Ali it. You could stay here and protest it and refuse to cooperate with it and stuff like that. In which case, there's a pretty good chance you're going to wind up in prison for at least a little while, or you can go to Canada. Right. Now, I don't think what's happening now is such a stark set of choices. I mean, I get why people. I think it's more like people are going, well, I just don't feel like dealing with all this stuff. It's the nation's having an existential crisis, not the America I'm used to. I'm going to get out of here. I get that, but it isn't. I mean, there really are other choices that don't involve getting shot at by by the other side or going to prison.
Yes.
So I don't give people. If people want to leave, I don't judge people either. If they want to leave, I get it. You want to go live in Costa Rica instead of here? I don't blame you. But there's the stay and fight part of it too. You've gotten a lot of things out of this. I mean, the way that I think about it is I've gotten an awful lot out of this country by living here. I've experienced a lot of things that, are part of the American experience. It just seems wrong to say, oh, you know what, I'm checking out. I don't like it now. I don't like how things feel now. All right, so we have Beckett calling up, probably about waiting for someone, but I'm not entirely sure. And we have let's take John and then we'll go to break. I think John's call is important, and also I just want to listen to John talk. John from Brantford, you are on the air.
Hi, Colin. You're my lunchtime entertainment since I retired, but I want to bring down the tone a little bit. It's so serious today.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm calling about MobLand, which has a fantastic cast, and I know you talked about it. But the problem I have is Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren have the worst Irish accents.
See, I
Did
think
you notice that?
Well, I thought Mirren. I was watching the most recent episode last night. To me, Mirren's. I mean, I defer to you, obviously. To me, I thought Mirren sounded okay, but I mean, this is an argument you're gonna win this argument.
Well, Pierce Brosnan grew up in Ireland, actually.
Yeah.
Near Dublin. But when you listen to him, sometimes he's got a bit of Kerry, sometimes he's Cork, sometimes he's Dublin.
No, that's the thing.
He's all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
I right now I've really become kind of impossible because I listened to 2 straight Adrian McKinty novels, and Gerard Doyle, the guy who voices the novels. He is spectacular. He's so good, and
he really is.
And he gets. There's a West Belfast accent and manner of speaking that is different from the other Belfast accent, and I'm
very,
and there are even little figures of speech like in West Belfast. You'd say, "Well, I'm very angry, so I am."
Exactly.
And so now I walk around talking to my dog in these accents, which I'm sure I'm butchering. In fact, there's this thing I've been calling my dog. That begins "we" and then the next word begins with an S, but and rhymes with kite. But I mean, it's so enjoyable to hear the music of these accents. But I would imagine for you as a native, hearing them done wrong or the kind of just the jumbling of a bunch of different regional accents would be infuriating.
Well, it's like you're talking about audiobooks. I remember listening to an audiobook many years ago, "A Wrinkle in Time" by Madeleine L'Engle.
Yes.
And she opted to read it herself, and her voice was so distracting, compared to listening to, say, Helen Mirren reading an Anne Patchett novel.
Yeah, no, I mean, these people who perform these books, they're performers. They're good at it. And it's good reason to turn it over to them. All right, I've got to go to a break here, John, but I believe what you're saying, and I believe it's annoying, but it's not annoying to most of us because we don't know any better. I don't know if that excuses it. It seems like I'm just throwing up my hands here. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we'll be back. We've got Mike, we've got Catherine, we've got Beckett, we've got everything.
I can see through you. Let myself be burned. Living like I know I'm gonna die. Living like I know I'm gonna die. Living like the future is a guess. Living like I'm smaller than a speck. Living like I'm gonna disappear. Living like I'm actually here. Like I know I'm gonna die. Like I know I'm gonna die.
So we are back. It's time to say some thank yous, starting with Dylan Reyes, our technical producer, and the Jedi Master, Gina Matruda, who ran in here and helped fix the screen that broke where we couldn't take the calls. It was just terrible. The producer today is Jonathan McPants. The call screener is Meg Fitzgerald. And who else am I forgetting? Am I forgetting anybody? And Joe Cost and people like that are helping out with our YouTube. It's a team effort is what I'm saying. It's a group project. All right, we're doing Ask or Tell Me Anything. The phones now work, 888-720-9677, 888-720-WNPR. One of the first people who tried to call today was Mike from Woodbury, and we couldn't put him on the air because the phones didn't work. So here he is now, and I think he has something important to talk about. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Colin. So I don't know if I'm funky, but I am a big music fan, as I know you are.
Yep.
And I like to think I have very eclectic tastes. I like rock, jazz, folk, Motown, you name it, except maybe not hip hop. I am a 70-year-old white guy after all. So, but I also love classical music, and I always have. I mean, even in high school, I would listen to, the Beatles and the Stones and Jethro Tull, whatever, and Beethoven and Mozart. I find that friends of mine that I have that are also, big music fans who I consider have good taste in music. They're not Nickelback or Limp Bizkit fans. They draw the line to classical. I cannot get them interested in classical music. I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, I guess it's no accounting for taste. But the aphorism commonly associated with Duke Ellington, I guess, is said there are simply two kinds of music: good music and the other kind. I mean, that's what I say. I mean, classical music is like the greatest music ever written. Why would somebody who has an ear for music not respond to it? I don't get it.
So I think also, first of all, it is a great aphorism. I've also heard it attributed to Louis Armstrong, which makes me think probably neither one of them said it.
Maybe.
But who it doesn't, it just seems to have more weight if it comes from them. So, but it's certainly true that there's good music and bad music. And it's funny because tomorrow I think I'm going to write a newsletter for Hearst about country music, because I've run into that too, that people are like, well, I don't like country music. Well, what even is country music? And I would say the same thing about what is classical music. So I've pulled up, I had pulled up on my phone, I have a playlist called Classical, and I just stick stuff in there. If I hear something that's kind of interesting, I throw it on the playlist. And so I think some of it is that if you don't spend a little bit of time just sort of relaxing and listening to some of this stuff and not worrying too much about it, or worrying that you could instead be, listening to the Allman Brothers or something. If you just spend a little bit of time with it and then figure out what it is that you like, because classical music, as you probably know, it's a misnomer anyway. It sort of was meant to apply to one specific period, and now it applies to like everything from Mozart to Bach to Carolyn Shaw to Arvo Pärt. And to me, some of the stuff that's kind of contemporary classical is now kind of oxymoronic term that gets tossed around, but that kind of stuff. I'm looking at my own, and it's sort of Max Richter and Arvo Pärt and Carolyn Shaw, and then quite a bit of Ravel and Satie, the French. I think the French impressionists are good, a good start, because most people at least know Satie and kind of get that. But some of the more recent stuff, or even and Philip Glass and Brian Eno, and then you start thinking, well, if Brian Eno belongs in this conversation, then what is it we're talking about now? What are we saying is classical music? And I think for people who don't experience it, who don't listen to it, who don't care about it, it's just this big fat blob, and and the truth is, it's a zoo with a lot of different kinds of animals in it, and some of those animals you probably would like if you could take the time. And the stuff that's coming out of Iceland these days, I know that sounds so strange, but there's so much interesting classical experimentation. You get that in the movie Tar. You suddenly realize there's this whole world. And it's funny too, because one of the things that I've seen said about the people creating music in Iceland is they said that this scene started because they were in Iceland and nobody really cared what they did. So they were free to experiment with minimalism and stuff like that. So I don't know. I share your frustration, because I feel like if you just spend a little bit of time and maybe set aside your existing prejudices and don't worry too much about Mozart, don't worry too much about Bach and Beethoven and Brahms, but maybe listen to some of the more contemporary stuff and see if it reaches you. I think another great on-ramp, oddly enough, is the television series Mozart in the Jungle. Because Mozart in the Jungle, they really kind of give you a sense of what the world of classical music is like. And they also incorporate a fair amount of modern stuff. So I don't know. This is something I could talk about for a long time, but it's not necessarily, Mike, something that I could talk about for a long time and say anything meaningful about. Although
this one friend of mine, we were in New York for something else, and I said, "Oh, wow, let's go to the Philharmonic because they're doing Dvorak's Eighth and Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto, the Emperor Concerto, with Leif Ove Andsnes, who is one of the greatest, living pianists. It was sublime. It was amazing. My friend was like, well, yeah, he can play piano. Yeah, I mean, he couldn't get into it.
Well, first of all, that's something that comes to. I can't really necessarily say that I can explain why Marguerite Argerich is, the alpha and omega of classical piano. And I'm not even sure my ears are well tuned enough to hear it. When I was working a lot, I worked with the Hartford Symphony on several different seasons of stuff that they did. And the one that I spent the most time on, I did reach a point where I could tell whether the orchestra was playing something well or not. But I mean, it's not something you can do automatically, and it's not necessarily something where you can tell right away that, that someone is playing a classical piece really well if you haven't familiarized yourself with it. So, I mean, I don't know, but it's their loss ultimately. I mean, it's their loss. But what I would suggest that people do actually is, like today, what did I do? I heard something called My Dove by Nils Landgren and the Swedish Radio Choir. So I threw it's the latest thing because it was an interesting little choral piece. And I thought, I'll throw that on the playlist and I'll listen to it later, spend some more time with it. I think if people just did that and sampled around and figured out what they really do like, because actually, I don't know, I'm surprised Dylan Reyes isn't like typing stuff to me right now because this is also very much in his area as well. But I think if they get started, they'll be surprised at how much stuff that they do like. But thanks for that call. I could probably squeeze one more call on the air today, and that will be Beckett, the aforementioned Beckett from Woodbridge. You have the floor.
Hey, Colin. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So this is a little bit of a public service announcement, but so I have seen in the paper, and people know about this, recently. So weight loss medications like Ozempic, these GLP-1 agonists.
Yep.
And there's a thing in the Times, I think last week or the week before, about there are, other there's been a shortage from the primary manufacturer, and so they allow these these third-party manufacturers to produce it at a less cost, which is now shutting down. Because there's enough of it from the primary, drug company. Anyways, the thing that I want to mention is that there's this craze for these types of weight loss drugs, right? Mm-hmm. They're kind of I see them on YouTube, whatever. And it's for mainly they were initially for diabetes, but they're being used mainly now for weight loss for people who can spend thousands of dollars for treatment. Mm-hmm. But the point I want to bring up is that diabetes, obesity, some cancers, a number of different things are really symptoms. I don't know if symptom is exactly the right word, but I'll say they're symptoms of a greater problem, which is, chronic inflammation, chronic stress on the body, a number of things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, which is, why I think a number of these chronic medical conditions exist. And the answer is not to buy a drug. Sure, in the short term, that's great.
Yeah, I mean,
but, I
hate to cut you off, but we're literally out of time. And I will say this. I mean, the role that these drugs play for diabetics is really, really different from the role that they play for celebrities who want to lose weight for the Golden Globes. And they do have a drug like Mounjaro has a meaningful role to play. So, I don't know, that's a longer conversation. We just don't have time for it. Hate to cut you off, but we have to say goodbye. So, goodbye. Thanks for listening.
On the 518. Now don't go away saying I've been mean. Like any gal, I can change my ways. A round trip ticket's good for 60 days. I've told you I love you, now get out.